Hey guys, today I want to bring you the second part of my series on how to make a World Championship building lineup. Today we're going to look a little bit at the second phase of the lineup building, which is going to be the strategizing phase. In the first video, I covered the exploration phase, where I basically explained how I got to the decks that I ended up working with. I'll link it in the description below the video I made previously. So a few more things that I want to say before I explain how I did the strategizing phase. Firstly, give you a rough idea of how many days we had each of those phases. For the first phase, I took around 4 days, where I just wanted to explore as many decks as possible. And then for the strategizing days, I took like a day and a half after I've had all the available decks, all the available data. All right, let's dive right into it. As always, at the end, I'm going to give you a little bit of a rundown of what are the important takeaways for this one, as well as what can you, if you're not a professional Hearthstone player but you want to prepare for a tournament, what can you do if you have a little bit less time on your hand but you still want to build some lineups and you want to see what's the best thing for you to play. But without further ado, let's get right to it. So for the strategizing phase, your goal is that you want to find out which lineups there are out there and which lineups you want to be able to explore. I'm going to take Donkey's side for the World Championship here on the screen to showcase you a little bit what was happening during the World Cup. So the first lineup that everybody kind of thought about was something along the lines of what XC ended up playing, which at that time, Quest Demon Hunter, Miracle Rogue for super strong, but you also had Boon Priest, which is like the top win rate deck on ladder, as well as Druid being one of the strongest classes. So this is basically like the strong deck lineup. And this is what oftentimes, if you're going to make lineups, a lot of your considerations revolve around is just a strong deck lineup. There's usually nothing wrong with just building a lineup that just consists out of strong decks, because that usually just on average gives you the highest percentage chance of winning in any random field. Just because you're naturally gonna be favored when you're playing the strongest decks. But then, of course, there's other people that play different variations of this, like a different Brood, a different Boon Priest and stuff like that. But then, of course, you have lineups like the ones that Deaddraw and I ended up playing, and a few others also had different takes on, where you have a little bit more of a control lineup. We tried to go for the Jackpot Rogue, the Control Priest, the Control Mage, and then still Demon Hunter. Demon Hunter in this tournament, or in general in this meta, was so strong that basically every lineup was playing it. It also didn't have enough bad matchups that any particular deck could target it. So this was one of these decks where it's so high in win rate, but at the same time, it can't really be targeted by any set of decks that is basically an auto include in every lineup, even if it doesn't perfectly fit your strategy. Mighty, for example, went a little bit further here, where he went with a Control Mage, Control Paladin, Control Priest, and a Thief Rogue. The goal here being good against 2 out of the 3 decks that are unbanned in the final 4 of the standard lineup. So basically also roving around the standard lineup here. He's trying to be good against Boon Priest and against Miracle Rogue. And then, of course, you have the aggro lineup, something most popular played by XMG, for example, where you play aggressive decks like Aggro Druid, Pure Paladin, Boon Priest, and Concoction Rogue, where the idea is if your opponent plays anything greedy like Death Metal Rogue or Alignment Druid, you have a very good matchup into those, because you can punish your opponent for being AFK a little bit. Especially if they play Alignment Druid, you have a very good matchup. So it turns out with these lineups, you can of course strategize them a little bit further, you can optimize them, you can have different inclusions. You can, for example, adapt the standard lineup a little bit like Xiao Ti did it, where he uses Jackpot Rogue to be not targeted by anybody that plays control decks, naturally giving him a huge edge over anybody that plays control decks. The only deck that is weak in Xiao Ti's lineup against control is Boon Priest, and oftentimes he will have the opportunity to get there, especially since you expect everybody to have Quest Demon Hunter, and Boon Priest having a very good matchup into Quest Demon Hunter. He has this strategy. Basically, but this is what it comes down to, and this is something I already want to summarize, is for most metas, you will have the tier 1 lineup, which just plays the tier 1 decks, and you have a little bit of a more controlish lineup, which will target some of the like all-in decks like Moon Priest or Miracle Rogue, and then you have a little bit of more of an aggressive lineup, which will try and target a little bit more of the like slower decks of those. So you usually have like anti-control, control, and aggro, and these kind of three stand around in a circle, and it's a little bit like rock paper scissors, depending on which lineup you face. For this World Championship, it was a little bit different because just Rogue and Demon Hunter were so much better than everything else, at least in my eyes, that those decks were kind of auto-includes, where Demon Hunter was pretty much like the same for everybody. Rogue had a lot of different facets to it, and a lot of different decks could be chosen. I want to show you a little bit on how you estimate how lineups are good against each other. What I was using for this a lot was HS Replay. The stats here, of course, are outdated because you're in a like later patch. But for example, if you have like an expected field, or you have a good estimate of what you think people are going to bring, how much of each lineup, you can kind of get a feel for what win rates your decks should be having. You can basically, for example, if you like expect to be running into like a Blessed Priest, Miracle Rogue, and like Quest Demon Hunter, and then like Alignment Druid, which was like a viable lineup, you could see what kind of decks you expect to be doing well against that. Obviously, for example, if you wanted to play a lineup that bans the Blessed Priest, you would see that if you get the expected lineup, the best decks to bring would be something on the line of like Blessed Priest. Of course, the stats here are no longer like correct because we are in a new meta game. But if I would sort this from top to bottom win rate wise, we will see that here, of course, on the top decks are Aggro Druid and Blessed Priest. The percentages really aren't important here because we're in a different meta. So this is a tool that we can use to estimate percentages and win rates against each other. So that is like basically in the strategizing phase, you're trying to come up with all the different lineups and all the different decks you could play in those lineups. For example, the like controlled lineup had a little bit of interchangeable parts. It had a Quest Priest, it had a Paladin, and it had Mage basically that we found, that were all like ideas on what to play in the lineup, and these parts could kind of be interchanged. And then of course a rogue. It just turned out that in this meta, Demon Hunter was so strong that you really couldn't skip it. So that made deck building and lineup building a little bit easier than last time. And that already brought us to the next phase, which is playtesting. You set up all the different lineups. You always try to find one deck or one lineup that is very good, with different thoughts in mind. The first thought in mind is power level, which is the let's bring a bunch of really good decks. Then secondly, if you're playing Conquest, it's the targeting thought. For example, here in our control lineup, we're trying to be decent against Miracle Rogue and Moon Priest. Or in the aggro lineup, you're trying to be good against other druids. So basically you have the second angle, which is targeting. And then the third angle, which is a little bit the common ban angle, which is most conveniently explained with the standard lineup. This lineup says I'm playing Druid, I'm playing Demon Hunter, which are bad against Moon Priest, I'm playing Rogue, which is not that great against Moon Priest. So basically I'm trying to ban Moon Priest, which I think is the best deck, playing the best decks that are left over after I've banned this deck that my other decks are bad against, right? And then I'm naturally bringing it because I also think it's the best deck, and there you have your lineup. Basically, you have the target strategy, and then you have the pure win rate strategy where you ban a deck and you try to get a lot of decks together that have a very favorable win rate. So basically, what can you take away from this if you're building a lineup for your tournament? If the meta is different, maybe there's not one OP deck like Demon Hunter that simply doesn't have enough bad matchups to be countered. I think you should also have a little bit of a look at what the different lineups are. What is the control? What is the anti-control? And what is the more aggressive lineup? What are the standard decks? How do you think they will get targeted? And can they be targeted? You build these different lineups, and if you're a newer player, you probably have one playstyle that suits you. And the tip that I can just give you, if you're a newer player, even if that one strategy that fits your playstyle isn't perfect, you don't have to rely on stats from HS Replay unless all your decks are 40%, then don't play them. But if you have a preferred strategy with a lineup that seems sensible, and you can either do one of those two things. You want to have either a class that you ban, that all your decks are bad against, giving you high win rates, or B, you want to be in Conquest, you want to try to find 4 decks that are consistent, that are going to target and possibly sweep one of the most popular decks. So if you have a feeling there's one deck that you think you can easily target, we have like 60% plus win rate with all your decks, then you can play those 4 decks together and put them in a lineup. But like I said, I think the most important thing is here that you play decks that you're personally very comfortable with and that you would like to play in the lineup, because that will make you play a lot better and have a lot better strategy in the tournament. If you found this video useful, be sure to like the video and leave a comment below, because I'll soon be working on the last and the most important and probably the most intricate phase, which is the playtesting phase. And I'm gonna basically let you in on all our secrets on why we chose specific decks, what is the things that we found in playtesting that maybe other people haven't found, and what is the final edge we got out of the playtesting phase to give us a lineup that made us first and second place in the World Championship. Hope you guys like this one, and I'll see you back on stream.